listening to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo, Andy Hughes, and Samantha Powell.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the What's on Your Bookshelf podcast. We are a podcast all about personal and professional growth, exploring the intersections of passion, potential, and purpose. I'm Andy Hughes, and with me, I also have Samantha Powell and Denise Russo and our producer, Scott Miller, as well. We are on plenty of platforms right now. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much any podcast platform you can think of, and we'd love to have you subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss any of our amazing content. Today, we are going to continue with the book, Coach Wooden, The 7 Principles That Shaped His Life and Will Change Yours by Pat Williams. And today, we're actually on the final chapter. However, this will not be the final episode of this series. We have some additional content coming your way, so don't think that this is the last of the series. It is the final chapter, but we have plenty more to come. So Denise, Sam, thanks again for having me here today. How are you both doing today?
Awesome. So good to be here with both of you.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's always a great time and great conversation. And, I just mentioned thanks for the opportunity. Kind of goes well with our theme today. The principle that we're going to talk about today is give thanks for your blessings and pray for guidance every day, which is something that I try my best to live the life that way every day, trying to be thankful for things. And there's a lot of great tips that we'll talk about in regards to this subject as well. But when looking at this principle itself, I think it is really important to have an attitude of gratitude, as it says in the book. Sometimes that's not easy. Everybody has their own challenges in the world, and sometimes it can be hard, but having a mindset of that attitude of gratitude, that can really change your whole life if you have that kind of mindset. One story that I wanted to bring up that I was thinking about as I was looking through the chapter was my uncle has Down syndrome and he is unable to communicate. So he communicates via sign language. And so when I was young, my mom and dad had me volunteer for Special Olympics in Pittsburgh, and because my uncle Jeff participated in it every year. And I can tell you that it was so inspirational to me. And it was amazing because here are all of these people who have a lot of things going on in their life. Some of them can't communicate or, just different things going on. And here they are having the time of their lives. They're the most positive people ever. And they're just so excited to have the opportunity to do all these Olympic games like we see on the Olympics on TV. And for me, I think just being in that environment as a young kid really helped me realize, it's just so cool to see these people. They have a lot going on in their lives and they're just having the time of their lives. They're so positive. It's just a great environment to be in. And I've done it for a long time. And it's always just such a great event to be at. And I think there's always people out there that need help. There's always people out there that maybe don't have a home or they don't have food. And so I think these are things that we really have to think about when we're looking at our own lives. I'm not saying that we know people don't have challenges. Everybody does. But I think we also really need to be thankful for what we have and really try to help others, as we talked about in one of the previous principles, helping others. I feel like those two go hand in hand. What were some of your thoughts in terms of this particular principle and chapter?
I love your story, Andy, about your Uncle Jeff, because what an amazing thing that you were able to experience. And I'll bet that also changed your life in ways that you didn't expect it to. Yeah. And your level of gratitude for what you have, what you don't have, and what your uncle, maybe that culture thinks he doesn't have that he actually does have, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It gets me thinking. I have this several years ago, I had this friend, Joan, who would come over and she was like, I'm going to call her my landscaper, but she was literally a homeless woman who had nothing. She slept in her car. She used money that she would make pulling people's weeds to go pay for like a $20 membership at LA Fitness so that she could use the showers and stuff. And every time she would come to my house, I would say to her, is there anything you need? And she would say, no, I have everything I need. I'm so grateful. And she said, You're the one that's suffering. You have to go to work. You're about to be on meetings all day long. You're stuck inside the house, but I get to be doing exactly what I want, where I want, how I want, when I want. And I often would ask her, you know, how do you have that attitude of gratitude? And hers came from a very strong, firm foundation of her faith and from her ability to be thankful for what she did have, not thankful for what she didn't have, and not be longing for what she wanted that she didn't have. And in fact, I wrote a bunch of articles about her years ago. I think that it's one of the books that Sam and I have been talking about that I have on the list of wanting to write the lessons I learned from my gardener, Joan. And I can't wait for you all to read more about it because she changed my life from an attitude of gratitude and simplicity for being grateful for what she had and not always looking for or wanting something she didn't.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me, there's a quote in the book that says, grateful people are happy people. They focus on what they have instead of what they want. And I love that, right? Like it's that concept of enough and that there's something to that. And the science backs it up. I mean, that was what I thought of when the chapter kicked off, Andy, was that, there's been so much research on happiness lately, like scientific research, and gratitude is, tightly wound with that. And I mean, that really, there's plenty of articles. I found some interesting things from like mindful.org. I even found some interesting stuff from like Berkeley and a white paper there that really talk about the science of gratitude. But research really shows that being grateful can support your overall health, your happiness, wisdom in ourselves and in our community. It's really interesting that gratitude is such a powerful tool. And I love that, this is the 7th and last principle here.
Oh man, you're so right. I'm in a class right now that is from a Yale professor on the science of well-being. And she started it by talking about how you want to be happier in life. Express gratitude. And in fact, the chapter says that. It says, when you're thankful for your blessings, more blessings flow your way. It doesn't say more things flow your way. It says more blessings flow your way. And then it goes on to say, studies show that people who express gratitude to God and to others on a regular basis generally experience a more optimistic mood, are less subject to depression, and are less prone to the many physical problems that often result from stress. Gratitude is then good medicine.
Yeah, that's great. And this part of gratitude being an attitude of this book, there's a part that talks about, there's an educator, Anne Husted Burley, who observed that gratitude, like love, is not a feeling, but an act of the will. We choose to be thankful just as we choose love, right? So there's this, when we're thankful, when we choose to be grateful, more blessings flow our way, more gratitude comes. When we put that out there in the world, when people tell us things that they love about us, we immediately want to tell them the things we love about them. And it just creates this environment, but it's a choice. And that's what I love. It's a choice. It's an act. It's something that we can step into, just like love, right? I choose to love you. I choose to sit in love with you. I choose to sit in gratitude with you. I think that's a really powerful thought process.
Yeah, I think too, even like if you're interviewing for a job or something like that, maybe there's a job out there that you really want, and maybe you applied for a job, you didn't get it. When you get that news, there's two avenues, right? There's one avenue where you just shut down and kind of give up. Or there's that other attitude of saying, hey, you know what? I'm thankful that I got an interview. I'm thankful that I got feedback so I can learn for the next one. I feel like there's every day people go through different situations like that. And you kind of, it is a choice. You either go the one way or you go the other way. You either win or you learn. It's one of those things where I think that kind of goes hand in hand with that too, with job interviews, with anything like that, really. I'm sure every day people have these events that happen and they have to choose one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. It gets me to think of the climate in the job market right now, is that there's a lot of articles coming out recently about people that did not get displaced from work, but a lot of their friends did, and that you have a choice to choose your attitude. And so the research that I've been reading lately is about how people are having this, strangely, a sense of jealousy over the people that lost their jobs. And as I started reading some of this, I thought to myself, how bizarre that people who still have a paycheck or still have health insurance or still have that job that they had yesterday or last week are jealous of the people that now have perhaps what they are looking at as like an opportunity. And yet, for people that may have been recently displaced from their jobs, whether it was on their own choice of quitting, or maybe they were laid off from their jobs, what I'm also noticing out in social media is a very drastic difference between people that have like a victim mentality of, oh, woe is me, I lost my job, versus people that think like, wow, could be the greatest thing that I just wasn't thinking about trying something new. In fact, this podcast was birthed out of a lot of our stories of transitions in jobs. We all three of us started working together in one company, and over time, over the last 5, 6, or 7 years, or however long it's been, we all three of us have moved around to different roles, different opportunities, different relationships. But the one constant that I think for our whole team, including Scott, is the sense of being grateful for what we have, despite obstacles, despite circumstances, despite feelings, but really finding something to be happy and grateful for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, like, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like going through adversity and overcoming adversity, like I become more grateful for that, going through that journey. It's very satisfying, maybe going through something and being able to overcome it, and then maybe making a weakness originally, maybe, and then turning that into a strength. I think that's really satisfying, and it shows the growth. We talk a lot about sports. I mean, that's something in sports too, right? I mean, maybe if you lose, maybe you go to the championship game and you lose the championship. Obviously, yeah, you're bummed, but you really learn a lot and you appreciate some of the things that maybe you didn't have that year. But maybe the next year you win the whole thing because of the experience that you had the previous year losing the championship. And I feel like when you win that championship or whatever it may be, it feels so much better because you went through that journey, you learned, and you're now able to pass that along to other people, that maybe the next generation. So I think for me, it's all about the journey as well.
I love what you're saying about that, because it's like you mentioned a second ago about winning and learning, which is actually the title of a John Maxwell book that I think we all have read, which is called Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. And it got me to thinking about when you were just describing your story, Andy, about Ted Lasso, because in that there's so many great leadership lessons in that. We should probably just do a podcast going through his episodes. It's so good. So good. Maybe we'll add that to the list for next year. So there in that story, for any of you who have not seen the television show, and if you haven't seen it yet, get Apple TV. It's so worth it. And so there is this idea, the team is not a winning team, really, that Ted Lasso is the coach for, but the team throughout the 3 seasons comes to find lots of learning lessons and a lot of love and a lot of gratitude. And yet one person that was from the team left to go become the coach of another team who was a winning team, had the best players, had all the money they needed, had all the things. And yet he just wasn't happy. And he longed for finding what he had when he was a part of that other team that wasn't always winning on the field, but where they were being led well. And one of the things in the book that struck me was it says in the book that gratitude is the key to happiness. So when I think about those two characters, Ted Lasso and then this other character, is that if gratitude is the key to happiness, grateful people are happy people. So if you're around somebody who's not happy, or maybe you don't feel happy, could there be something that you could find more pleasure in simple blessings? Because this says in the book, people that are grateful focus on what they have instead of what they want.
I love that. I don't know why I'm thinking this as you're telling that story, but I watched this TED Talk. It was a long time ago. I'll have to look it up if we want to put a link to it, because it was years ago. But it was talking about your partner, right? Your husband, your wife, your spouse, your life partner, whatever, the person that you're with. And they were saying that when you observe that person from afar, so like you're at a party and you're watching that person across the room, talk to people, tell a joke, do whatever, just be themselves. And you're watching them from a distance, right? You put distance between yourself and that person. you kind of, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's like you almost fall in love with them all over again, and you find all this gratefulness in them again, where you're observing, right? You're like, when you take that step back, and I think that's what, gratitude's really about, is taking a step back and looking at what you have around you and really appreciating it for what it is, right? And only in that distance, only in that space can you really, really appreciate, wow, this person is, wow, like I remember why they gave me butterflies 25 years ago when we first met, right? It's only in that like little bit of space. When I think about gratitude, that's what I think about is, in that step back, in that appreciation.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. I mentioned last episode about maybe the last episode and the one before that and the one before that and the one before that, that my favorite planner is called the Passion Planner. We'll put another coupon, Scott, if you can remember to put the coupon into the show notes for people who are interested. But there's an entire section in there where you express gratitude. You reflect back on what you're saying, Sam, like things that happened last month, last week, people you're grateful for, things that you're grateful for. And I notice that every time I go back and look at the journal, those stories like you're talking about, they come front and center in my mind. Yeah. I feel great about it. In fact, Andy, there's some other tips that Pat has in the book around 156 or so. Do you want to share with the listeners the different tips that he says you could do that will help you to remember the things of gratitude and also express it?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think it's a good time to talk about it. Absolutely. So 4 of the things that were brought up were to keep a gratitude journal, which I think is very interesting because I feel like every day there's probably situations that I don't even think about that I should be grateful for. So I feel like having that journal would be cool. Practice saying thank you and mean it. That's another one. Send thank you notes and use gratitude and praise to build people up. So those are some of the tips that we have here, and all of them are great tips. But the journal one's interesting because it reminded me of one of the Minute with Maxwell videos I watched, John, and he was talking about, I think he was talking about gratitude. I think with maybe there was a guest on it, and he was mentioning something about being intentional, and he brought up an example of going to a restaurant and saying to the waitress or waiter, thank you for being here. And I thought that was interesting because waiters and waitresses, they're always just taking orders and maybe having people complain, but no one's ever intentional saying, hey, thanks for being here. Thanks for coming to work today. And it made me think about it because if you go to a restaurant and nobody's there, you're not eating there. There's no workers. So it got me thinking a little bit of that when we were talking about the gratitude journal, because there's just every day there's situations out there where we could easily be thankful for things, but we just don't really think about it. So that struck a chord with me with the gratitude journal.
Oh man, I love your example about the restaurant, because one of my most favorite things to do is if the kids and I are out and we like the server, we'll kind of conspire that we're going to ask the server for their manager. So we'll get to the end of the meal and the server will maybe be joking around with us or just knowing that there's a good energy, but we'll say, hey, would it be too much trouble to speak to your manager? And almost instantly you get this look of fear, or like, oh, why do you want to talk to my manager? And so whenever they get the manager and bring the manager over to the table, it's just such an awesome feeling to be able to express gratitude, especially if the person is standing within like earshot of what you're saying to the manager about them. Yeah. And there's been plenty of times that has led to not only us going back to those restaurants and that person going above and beyond in serving us whatever we're eating, but we've become friends with people that we've met in restaurants that have served us, which is kind of strange to think about. I told a story once of a person in California that impacted Vincent, but there's another person that did the same thing in Florida, and we stay in touch with each other like friends now. We actually see each other outside of work, all because the service they gave was something we were grateful for. And then we turned that gratitude into sharing it with someone else being their manager in that example. And so that's one of my most favorite things. When I said Vincent's name, though, it also struck something funny. Well, he wouldn't probably think it's funny. But in fact, I'll have to see if he'll be willing to listen to the episode. But when he was little, if he would ever say something nasty or mean or just negative, I would stop him and say, stop, say 3 things you're thankful for. And at first he would come up with really good ones, but when he'd get mad at me, he'd just say things like, I'm thankful that you're asking me to be thankful. I'm thankful that the thing I'm mad about is what I'm mad about. And he kind of like lost the sense of what it was. But I promise you, if you guys see him or you meet him when you come to Florida and you ask him about that, from a young age, it got ingrained to him that if you're going to say something negative, spin it around and say 3 positive things. And usually it diffused him.
Yeah, I'm stealing that with my son. I think that could be a good thing with him, right? Like turn that frustration into a moment of gratitude. I love that. I love that. I was thinking as you were, Denise, like only you would like sit down and just go eat at a restaurant and come out like with a new friend. Like I just, if that does not speak to like the wonderful person that you are, I don't know what does. But I was thinking about my husband has this phrase where, you know, like you always say, like, somebody does something for you and he's like, oh, thanks, appreciate it, right? Like you that's kind of a normal like thing that rolls off the tongue. He doesn't say appreciate it. He says, I appreciate you every time. And like the first few times he said, I'm like, that's weird. It's a little it's a strange thing. But what I've noticed is it's a different level, right? It's the practice saying thank you and meaning it. Like, I don't just appreciate that you brought me my food. I appreciate that you showed up today and you are here as your full body self. Like, that's a deeper level of appreciation. And it's this little phrase. It's one word change to a common phrase, and it has a whole deeper meaning. And he really does mean it at a deeper level. Like it's his way of showing appreciation for those around us in our community and, you know, things like that. I laughed at him the first few times, and then I actually took a minute and thought about it. And I was like, oh, that's actually kind of beautifully wonderful. I love it.
I love it. Well, he must have been subliminally knowing about this chapter then, because even Andy, you were saying that it says in here to say thank you until you mean it. So really, when you're just saying thank you, not just like, oh, thanks, but really saying something that you're thankful for. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. I think about that with like leadership feedback, right? When you're giving somebody feedback, you don't just say, hey, you did a good job. You say, hey, what I really appreciate or what you did a really good job in is this really specifically, because it makes you sit in that moment of real appreciation and in real gratitude. When you take it that step further, when you really mean it, you can put the context and the description to it. And that's what people remember about it, right? Like that's what people remember about you. That's what people remember about the situation is, right? It's that Maya Angelou quote, like how you made them feel. You make them feel something by getting really specific, by really meaning, you know, what you say. And I love that.
Oh man, there's a part in the book that goes right with this. It says that the beautiful thing about gratitude is that it does so much good for those who give it and for those who receive it. And it gets me to think about how during the time of COVID, my hairdresser was not cutting hair. And so for about that year when we were in lockdown, I'm a short hair person. So anybody who doesn't know me, I'm a short hair person. And so I need to have my hair cut pretty regularly, and I wasn't able to get it cut. So my kids gave me this challenge and said, Mommy, just grow out your hair and see if you can grow it long enough to where you can donate it. Well, it went through so much of my hatred because I hated long hair, and I haven't had long hair since I used to work for Nickelodeon. And it was like a requirement where if you were a girl, you had to have a ponytail, silly requirement back in the early 90s. But yeah, that's another topic for a different podcast.
We're not opening that can of worms.
Yeah. So, but in any case, so I get to the point where my hair is long enough to donate. And my hairdresser was like, well, I can't cut it for you because we don't have the service to donate your hair. But here's a lady you might want to try at another salon that can do it. So I ended up meeting this lady. Her name is Charisma. Like, what an amazing name anyway. Oh. And so she decided to cut my hair, and I told her what we were doing. And she was so emotional about why we were doing what we were doing. And she did all the research of where we were going to send my hair and how it was going to get there and how would we know the child that was going to get my hair for their wig and stuff like that. And so when she was done cutting my hair, it was almost like this weight. Well, it truly was like a weight off of my shoulders, literally. And we took pictures, we cried, we hugged. She became my new hairdresser. And so I went and saw her yesterday. And this is now, obviously months and months later, she's been cutting my hair. And we were talking about the podcast, and she said, I'm just so grateful that you are taking the time to do something in your quote unquote spare time to invest in other people. And I can't wait to listen to the next episode. So I want to say secretly, like, she's going to be hopefully so excited that we get to mention charisma in this episode, because her gratitude towards me was really that I'm most grateful for her.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, there's a quote in the book from the author Melody Beattie, and it says, gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more, turns denial into acceptance, chaos into order, confusion into clarity. It can turn a meal into a feast, a house into a home, a stranger into a friend. And I think I don't know, I think that, like I said, you're the epitome of turning a stranger into a friend. And, and I think that, that really comes through in that, that gratefulness, that connection, that, really meaning it at the end of the day. Like that's what people are so attracted to. And again, like what you were saying, right? When you give gratitude, it's not just about you, it's just as much, if not more, about the receiver of that gratitude. And, just that's such a beautiful space that sits in.
Yeah. I like the appreciate you thing you brought up, Sam, too. I like that a lot. I may have to steal that.
Yeah. It sounds weird the first few times, but like now that I'm used to it, it's nice.
I love that too. In fact, at our old job, well, Andy's still job, which probably feels old sometimes, but the whole thing you have there for gratitude is called Go Appreciate, right? Go/appreciate. And so if you can appreciate others, I loved your idea, Sam, about how be specific. Don't just say thank you, but say thank you for this specific thing. There was something in the book, Sam, that you mentioned about how, tell us the part where it's like acknowledging someone personally when there's something good happening, but the reverse when it's not so good.
Yeah, it's the fourth one of these tips that they gave us. So use gratitude and praise to build people up, right? Like that immediately made me jump into my leadership hat. And there's a quote that says, it's from Warren Buffett, who's the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. And he has a rule that he follows in his dealings with his employees. You praise by name and criticize by category. And I love that, right? It's getting really specific at the person. Like, hey, Andy, I love that you did this for me. It was really great. Like, great, great, great job. But then if there was something that isn't going so well, it's not, oh, Andy, you got to work, you got to work on this. It's no, we as a group or this division or this thing, hey, here's where we wanted to be, but it's not where we want. And I love that kind of separation of like, the praise is the individuals, right? Like I can recognize that, I can get down and I can care about you and get into that depth of specific praise for you. But when we criticize, we make it an us problem. We make it a group thing. How do we solve this? And like, I love that thought process of living in that level of gratitude that I can appreciate every individual for uniquely who they are and what they bring to the table. And I can tell them that. And then when things aren't going so great, we solve it as a collective group. And like, I don't know if that's not levels of a leadership lesson there. Like, oh, that's like, I loved that.
Oh man, there's so many leadership lessons from Warren Buffett, right? Even to the point of where he wants to give away all of his wealth before he dies. And the book says that he always builds people up. He never tears them down. To me, that is the shortest leadership lesson to give anyone as a leader, because if your company measures things like leadership trust aligned with employee engagement and productivity, if any of those three metrics are low, I'll bet if you just tweaked a little bit with what you just said, Sam, by building people up, not tearing them down, giving specific appreciation, showing gratitude. There was another story in the book, Sam, that you saw from Tony Dungy. Tell us about that, because that was a beautiful story about how he expresses gratitude when people don't even know it.
Yeah, so this is the next subsection of this chapter is it all comes down to prayer, which is a really important thing for, Coach Wooden, who's a man of faith. And this chapter is pray for guidance and counsel and give thanks for blessings. But in this section, all about prayer. It's got a story of Tony Dungy, and they would set up chairs for a pregame chapel before he would have a game with like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And somebody walked into the room, and there was a guy setting up the chairs, and the guy who was setting up the chairs was Tony Dungy. And the guy was like, "Hey, do you want me to help you do that?" And he's like, "No, I like doing this myself." And so the quote is like, "No, thanks. I don't need help. I like to set up each chair myself. I know where each man sits. I know his needs and where he's hurting. I pray over each man's chair as I set it up." And I just loved this. It reminded me of one, just the again, that depth of leadership that you really get down to. You know those in your charge. You know where they're great, where they're wonderful. You also know where they're struggling and where, you need to support them and give them what they need. But I like to crochet. My grandmother taught me and my cousin how to do that, and both of them are now passed, and so I'm the sole crocheter left in my family. And I've made gifts for people over the years. I've made things to donate to Special Olympics, things like that, scarves and such. And when I crochet for a gift, what I like to do is to, as I'm stitching, really kind of meditatively think about that person and think about all the wishes I have for them. What are the blessings that I hope they get? What are the things that I'm grateful for that person? What are the things that I hope happen to them that are good? And really, almost praying over, the stitches, and really thinking about and sitting in, my appreciation and my love and wants for that individual, so that when I give them that gift, not only did I spend time and energy on it, I also spent that thankfulness journey, so that when they wrap themselves in the blanket or in the scarf or in the hat that I gave them, they're also wrapping it in all those good intentions, that I have for them. And I love that. And that's what I thought of with the story of Tony Dungy is, it's a really repetitive task, like set up a chair. But I didn't just set up this chair. I set up this chair for Denise. And, I know Denise needs this right now. And so I'm going to wish that thing for her. I'm going to pray that thing for her. I'm going to hope that thing for her that she needs. And gosh, just to know that somebody would be out there doing that for me, that's so wonderful, and that level of connection. And I just loved that story and that way to, if you're a praying person, you'll pray over somebody. If you're not, but just, the wishes, the hope that I want for you, thought process. And I just think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, that is really cool. Tony Dungy's on TV a lot now too, I think. And I think he actually wrote a book of his own as well. That doesn't surprise me that he did things like that. I know, just hearing from different players that played for him and stuff, they always just have so many great things to say about him. And it's not only just the action of with the chair and praying, but he says that he knows where they need help, so there's obviously a lot of work that goes into knowing what they're doing well at and maybe what they need help with and what he's wishing for. So that's really great. I mean, that's a great leader right there that's doing not only just, the praying, but also doing a lot of that other work of trying to figure out, hey, what do these people need help with, or, what can I pray for them for? Yeah.
Yeah. He has several books out, actually. He's an awesome coach. It's so interesting that we find so many leadership lessons from coaches, like sports coaches, and he's a great example. He's also a public speaker. Vincent, my son, he's reading right now actively one of Tony Dungy's books. It's called The Mentor Leader: The Secrets to Building People and Teams That Win Consistently. And so it doesn't start by saying the secret to winning games. It says the secret to building people and teams by being a mentor leader. So if you haven't checked him out, check out some of his books. I think he has, if he doesn't have his own podcast, I'd be totally surprised, but he has for sure some blogs and other information that are out there that are leadership lessons for business and for life. So in interest of time, I'll bet, Sam, we're running close, if not beyond our time for today, right?
Yeah, we're getting close, but we're at the end. We're at this very last section of the last principle in the last chapter before the epilogue, of course. But this is dominated. The chapter is the subsection is dominated by love, which I think is such a beautiful way to end this book, right, about Coach Wooden. Because when I think about Coach Wooden, I think about how he loved his players, his family, his wife, the people that he mentored. I mean, he showed that love in so much of what he did. And I think that that's so interesting, right? We're praying for guidance and counsel. We're giving thanks for your blessings each day. But fundamentally, that's dominated by love. I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
I totally agree. I love that you shared the story about kind of looking at some of the things you love about your husband. I know how much you also love your son. I love being here with both of you. So, Sam, what are you going to do for your accountability before next time?
I think it's going to be better about journaling, that gratitude journal. I have this really great journal that one of my friends gave me called the Happiness Project. And it's a 5-year, 1-sentence journal. Every day you write one sentence. And I just think I'm going to pick that back up because I got a little out of sync with it. I'm going to start where I am and just write a sentence of gratitude every day. Simple, easy, but just bring that into my life more methodically and, habitually. What about you, Andy?
Yeah, that's literally what I was going to do too with the gratitude journal. I just think that was a cool idea. Something I never really thought about before I read that. I just, like I was saying earlier, just think about so many situations every day that I run into that I don't really think about like being thankful for. I think being intentional and having like that journal will really help me. And I'm sure by the end of the day, I'll have a pretty long list if I'm really intentional about that. So that's going to be mine as well.
Well, you know what? You can actually, this is interesting about the Passion Planner that I was telling you about. They're so confident in their product. You can download the entire thing for free if you just want to print it out yourself and not buy it. So you might go over to that link, Andy, and figure out where the gratitude sections are and then make up your own Andy Hughes journal and start there. I think something kind of cool. Yeah, I think for me, I love both of your ideas. I love the Happiness Project, by the way. I need to get where I am in the habit, right? We're getting ready to come out with the next podcast about habits. I can't wait to do that. I need to get into better habits. So, and so speaking of, I think my accountability is going to be something that I need to have better habits around, which is throwing things away and cleaning up some clutter. And Olivia told me this morning, she's like, Mommy, I don't think I can sit in your room because there's no feng shui. And I was like, what? Okay. So that clearly means that I need to throw some things away. And the way that we talked about on an episode previously, Marie Kondo has this great book called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. My mom gave it to me a couple years ago, and I should be grateful that she gave it to me. I don't know if she thought there was a subliminal reason to give it to me.
Thanks, Mom.
But Marie says this really great thing. Like when you're cleaning out your house, you take the thing that you're going to get rid of and you decide, like, is this something I need to have? Or is it something that gave me joy when I had it? And that when you get ready to throw it away, you take the thing that you're going to get rid of and you put it in your hands. And the book literally says you actively and intentionally express gratitude for that thing. Because at the time in which you bought it and you used it, you needed it. And now you're expressing gratitude before you take it into its next part of its journey. It's kind of a really beautiful way to get rid of stuff. So I think for me, I'm going to have to be conscious as I go on my rampage through the house, throwing things away today, that I want to be grateful for the things for when I had them.
Yeah, I love that. And maybe you could combine that with a gratitude journal, like, right, when you find those things, write down who gave it to you and go express gratitude for that person. Be like, oh, I just came across this thing, and I appreciate you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Andy, I think we're done for today. You want to close us out?
Yeah, this was a great discussion. Thank you all for just your great thoughts, and thank you to all the listeners out there that are listening to us. As we mentioned, this was the final chapter of the book, but we still have more content coming on this book, so stay tuned for that. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the platforms that you can think of, so please subscribe. We'd love to hear from you as well. If you have any suggestions, comments about it, we're always happy to hear feedback from you, the listeners. So for myself, Andy Hughes, Denise Russo, and Sam Powell, thank you very much for joining us on the What's on Your Bookshelf podcast. We'll see you next time.